All right, as we said, President Trump is back in Washington this morning after taking the red eye from Alberta, Canada last night. Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull is still in Calgary, Alberta, Canada for day 2 of the G7 summit, and she joins us now. And Haley, President Trump already back at the White House. What are people saying there at the G7 summit of his early departure?
Yeah, Holly, really not a lot of loud statements coming out of the G summit here in Alberta, Canada, following President Trump's departure. The White House citing the Middle East as the reason for needing to cut it short as tensions have escalated between Iran and Israel. President Trump planning to spend at least part of the morning in the Situation Room, saying that they had done everything they had to do here in the G7 and, quote, being on the scene is much better. Now, Trump says they are looking for what he called a real end and complete give up. And repeatedly, what we heard from him on comments here on the ground in Canada, on Air Force One with reporters, as well as over social media the last 24 hours, was that he was adamant that Iran not have a nuclear weapon, and his belief that they should have signed a deal. Now, President Trump telling reporters overnight that he has not reached out to Iran for peace talks. He indicated he is considering sending Vice President J.D. Vance and Special Envoy Steve Witkoff to meet with the Iranians, depending on how things develop, but also didn't put weight into his willingness to negotiate. Listen.
We're not looking for a ceasefire. I didn't say I was looking for a ceasefire. That was Emmanuel, nice guy, but he has to get it right too often. But we're not looking. We're looking for better than a ceasefire. I told them to do the deal. They should have done the deal. Their cities have been blown to pieces. They've lost a lot of people. They should have done the deal. I told them do the deal. So I don't know. I'm not too much in a mood to negotiate.
And Holly, as President Trump left here, he signed on to a G7 leader's statement on the Middle East. Certainly a significant development out of the G7. And that statement from the leaders stating that Iran cannot have a nuclear weapon, supporting the security of Israel and calling for a resolution, or rather urging one, but notably not directly calling for a stop to operations. Now, Trump said some officials in the U.S. delegation have stayed behind after what has now become his first and only working day at the G7 Leaders Summit, his first international summit of this second presidential term, Holly.
And Haley, so what do we expect out of the G7 today?
Yeah, certainly a lot of focus is expected still on the Middle East, but particularly on Russia's war in Ukraine. In fact, there is a working session amongst the leaders dedicated to that. Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky expected to take part in that. President Trump and Zelensky had been expected to meet in a pool-aside meeting, which, of course, now off track, we can presume, given the change in President Trump's schedule. Another major focus for leaders here has been trade and economy, particularly as Trump has pursued to negotiate a number of deals. He signed one with the United Kingdom yesterday. He said dealing with auto tariffs, steel, aluminum, and aerospace. He said Japan was tough, but that there's a chance of a deal, and called his meeting with the Canadians good. He had also been expected before he left to meet with Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum. Of course, scheduling changing here this morning, Holly.
All right, Scripps News White House correspondent Haley Bull traveling with the president and the White House delegation in Western Canada. Haley, thank you for that update.